Recording in progress.
Namaste, folks. So stack yourself up on your bones, either in a chair or on your feet. This is your time to center. Check in and see what's going on with you. What are the sensations through the body? What's your energy level? If you decide to notice emotions and thoughts, make sure you don't go down the rabbit hole. Just let them pass and then go on to scanning other elements of who you are at this moment. Once you have a good overall picture, focus more on your breath. How are you breathing in and out right now? Just let each breath be. You're just watching. See if you can begin to get a sense of filling yourself up from the lower ribs to the mid ribs, to up under the collarbones, a little bit above the collarbones, without raising shoulders. Everything's expanding outward. And then when you're ready to empty, empty from the top back on down so that everything falls back toward the center, towards your spine. Slow your breath down. Don't force. If it feels uncomfortable, you're going too slow. Then move over to a wall if you have one. If you don't, I'll give you an option. What we're looking to do is open up from the shoulder into the chest, the side chest. So you're going to plant your one hand as high as you can on the wall, maybe even come up on your toes, and you're going to be able to distort your posture as long as you don't twist, with the attempt to get the underarm to touch the wall, and you just hang out there. Now, if you don't have a wall, or if you're in a chair, find a second surface, a desk, a counter, and you'll just do the same thing going horizontal. So we're looking again to open up this whole connection between the arm and the front of the chest, the arm and around into the side chest. And then you can try the other arm. You may want to pause and notice that, oh, look, I now have one arm longer than the other. It's indication of all that tension that you've let go. So again, we're reaching as high as possible, heels come up, or you are reaching horizontally to your surface. And as things open up, you completely lower or back up whatever is in terms of your body beneath it. So I'm not letting my hand slide down. It is temporarily glued. If there's pain in this, you've gone too far, stop, modify. And then let it go and pause. And let's do both at the same time. So if you feel like, but I'm sticking my ribs out, I'm sticking my butt out, I'm sticking all the things out, that's okay. In this particular bit of work, we are not as concerned with alignment. We want to facilitate opening so that if we are putting things out of line, we may actually be able to set up conditions to open things a little bit more. And then let it go. And come back to your even standing or your even sitting. Line things up for yourself. So reminder, everything goes over the heel bones, and then you're just stacking up the tinker toys. The lower ribs, remember, we'll feel like, oh yay, let me help, I'll hold you up. Yeah, don't. You want the lower back ribs to be stacked on top of the hips, not forward into the middle of the hips. If you need to roll the shoulders around a little bit more so that you can back your head up on top of the stack, sure, go for it. Then feel yourself gently press down actively through the legs, because we're going to take the arms up, Urdhva Hastasana. And you can either make this a journey where you reach on your inhalation and lower again as you exhale, or if it feels appropriate, stay. When the arms are up, you're pushing down through the outer leg into the outer heel. Don't lose your big toe joint though. Contact with the floor there. And the arms are reaching up, perhaps most from this front aspect of the elbow and the small finger, but don't forget about your other fingers here. And we're using the arms and legs in opposite directions to traction the spine. Now, once this front of the arm into the torso opens, you'll be able to slide your shoulder blades further down your back. If you feel like your shoulders are up around your neck, it's not ideal, but for the moment, it's not a bad place to start. And then you can gently, the other game you can play is open a little bit and let go, open a little bit and let go, but we are not doing it from the waist. And by now, you're probably ready to let it go. So let the arms come on back down again. Let's head down to the floor temporarily. I'm going to show my chair people where you can go first. Those of you heading to the floor, you're on hands and knees. Chair people, wider legs, hands on a surface in front of you. We're going to be rounding and arching. So we would like to have the thighs one vertical structure, so not hips back, not hips forward. Can you get as perpendicular as possible here? Same thing with the arms, right below the shoulders. If your wrists are not happy, you can put the heel of the hand up on a thing and lower the fingers down further. So find what feels to you like a neutral spine, tabletop spine. Don't forget that your neck is part of your spine. And then as you exhale, push on your knees, push on your hands, round your back up to the ceiling. We're looking to round the length of the back of the torso and also the width of the back of the torso. Your ribs are much happier with this movement than your low back. Do not force the back of your waist into a curve, but do encourage it gently to open. Let the head hang so that we're getting a little bit of a curve in the neck. You can even intentionally gently tuck the chin. And the next time you exhale, squeeze the arms and legs together and find an arch. So we don't want to make this all about the neck doing all the arching. And we distribute the arch through the entire spine, from your tailbone up to between your ears. Your waist is happier with this movement than your rib cage is, but see if you can find little places in the ribs. Now this pulling the arms and thighs toward each other will help to stretch the torso in a lengthwise so that You may be feeling a stretch on the front of the torso, exactly what we want here. And then start going back and forth. There are a lot of ways that you can breathe while doing this. Some people advise exhaling as you go to cat and inhaling as you go into cow, which is that arched back shape. My preference is to exhale at the extremes and then inhale as you come back through the center. So you find your neutral spine on an inhalation, and then you either round or arch, cat or cow. And if your pace of breath is a whole lot faster than mine, see if you can slow it down a little bit. You don't need to get to as slow a pace as my breath. But the more time you have to really investigate these shapes, the better. And wherever you are in the cycle, finish it up so that your cow, your arch shape, is your last one. And come on back to neutral. And if you're sitting, you're just going to come back up to your neutral sitting position. And then let's come back up onto feet. I'm going to adjust something on my computer for a moment here. Okay, technology managed. So you want to have a belt, which might mean you're getting back down to the floor after getting up to get one. I'm getting up because I'm getting for our chair folks. We're going for a back of leg stretch, a passive stretch. So this is, again, put your foot up on something and you will be just pulling back on the forefoot with the belt. On the floor, we're in constructive rest. I'm going to choose my right leg. You can choose whichever one works best for you. And you want to make sure that you've got a firm hold on this belt. Now, if that means your fingers are not happy, I would suggest you wrap the belt around your wrist. If you don't have a belt, towels work well. You can use a yoga blanket if you have one. Anything that you can wrap around the front of the sole of your foot, so behind your toe joints. This is the stretch where we let the leg hang. Right, we've done this one before. So it's completely the back and the arm strength. We want the knee fully extended. If you're in a place where your knee is bent, that's not the place we want to be. We would also like this leg that's on the floor to be as long on the floor as possible. If you have a slight arch in your back, that's preferable to a flattened back here. And then you find where's the place where when you pull down on the belt and let the leg come closer toward your face, right? Where's the place where you feel a gentle pull? And then you just hang out there. You can do a little bit of rotating at the hip joint. You can cross the leg over a little bit, not a lot. And if your hip joints are not original equipment, this is not for you. Stay in that neutral position. And then come on back to the center and change legs. So we're looking to get the calf a little bit open, the back of the thigh a little bit open. So again, the setup is important. Better to start with the leg lower. Make sure that leg on the floor is fully extended. Tailbone is heavier than your waist here. And then we're pulling on a fully extended leg using the back. So if I let this go, right, it's falling. If you're holding your leg up, you're doing extra work that we don't want here. We want the leg to be falling into the tissue at the back of the bones. So yes, calf stretch by pulling downward on the belt, and hamstring stretch by pulling backward on the belt. If you have found a place where your foot is way up here, please be very, very suspicious, because either your hips are dangerously hypermobile, or what's more likely is you have flattened your back and you're no longer effectively stretching just the back of the leg. rotating at the hip joint if you like. And if you find a place that you feel, oh, that's a delicious stretch, let me stay there for a bit, then absolutely stay there for a bit. If you have original hips still in place, you can cross the leg over a little bit. And then come on back to the center. Let it go. If you're sitting, you're coming back up to neutral sitting. And we're going to get back up onto feet again. So chair folks, we're going to be working with some of the wide like positions, which means you're sitting toward the front edge of your chair. Those of you who have a chair where you can sit diagonally, you can get a lot done by sitting on the diagonal. Those of us who are standing are heading up into a wide stance. So folding forward, let me back up for a moment. Some of you may feel like you need a chair in front of you, a surface in front of you. If the backs of your legs are tight, blocks are going to be what I'm going to use. I'm also going to turn sideways. So if you're in a chair, you have another surface in front of you. We're folding all the way forward. We're using that stretch that we just did in the back of the legs. And with your hands firmly on a surface here, can you find that cow shape? So if you can get all the way to the floor, but you cannot find the cow shape, that arched shape, go higher. If that means you're up here while you find your cat and cow, that's where you need to be. So we find whatever stretch we have appropriate on the back of the legs, and then we find this arched position. So again, that feeling of pulling the arms and legs toward each other isometrically, while the hips smile upward and away from your shoulders, which are also smiling upward and away from the hips. So we're in Prasarita Padottanasana with a cow spine, which just means your feet are wide apart. Enjoy that length through the front of the torso. You may feel it more deeply than just skin level. As long as it's not painful, all good. And when you're ready to come up, you're going to wait for a good strong inhalation. You are using all this muscle, all these glutes back here to bring you upward. And then either step your feet in or scoot them into where you have some control and get them back underneath you. Check in for a moment. Just notice how things feel. We're staying wide-legged. Let's head back out. Parshva So remember, that's the one where we're turning sideways. Front foot, the direction we turned in, is your 12 o'clock on the clock. Back foot is either 10 or 2, depending upon what foot you are using, right? Both thighs turn outward. If you're sitting in a chair, you're just turning and you're doing all of this with both hips, both sits bones in contact with the chair. And then we rotate to the ribs to the original front direction. If your hips just came with your ribs, go back to the base, start again. Wrap the legs away from each other. That's a firm anchor. And then turn sideways. And once you are there, just start shifting your hips. So on the chair, you're just rocking from one sits bone to the other. We're finding all the little places, especially in this direction. You may find, ooh, look, I have an inner thigh. All the little places that might be still a bit sticky. You may find more in this direction on the back. You may also find some stuff on the outside of the hip. And then shift yourself around. Take your feet a little bit wider if you can. You'll do that by moving your front foot a little further away from your back foot. Again, roll the thighs, rotate the ribs, arms up. If you're having shoulder issues, bend your elbows, or since the arms are not particularly important here, we're more interested in what's going on around the hips and thighs, you can just let the arms go. So no knees are bending here. This is strictly a one side wall to the other side wall shift. And if you find a spot where you feel, oh, I need to stay there and loosen it up, Sure, have your little dance party right over in that one spot. And then come on back to the middle. Get those feet in and underneath you. So remember, if you are stepping the feet in close, train your landing for that eventual time when I'm going to hold the door open for you, even if you can't. I'm holding the door open for you. You might be able to jump again someday. We're going back out to wide. We're going back out to this 10-2 position. So feet, thighs, rib cage. We're going to leave the arms out of it because I want you to be able to pay special attention to the feet. Scoot that front foot further away from the back foot. At some point, you will lose the outside of the back foot. That's when you went too far. So we would like to find a place where you can tip your hips up a bit, not as far as is your total potential. And then you're going to get used to the idea of folding at the hip, but not going with the knee. So as you fold at the hip, can you feel more of this opposite hip going? Now, if you thought, okay, I'm going to bend my knee, that's a little different from initiating from the hip joint. See if you can initiate from the hip joint and let the knee just relax. Try that a few times. Find the hip tilt, fold at this front hip joint, let the front knee relax. Again, if the weight is shifted toward that front knee, that is not great for this front knee. It may be useful for some things, not for where we're going. And one little other detail I'd like you to pay attention to, this front knee, is it rolling more toward the big toe or more toward the small toe? Can you get it to roll more toward the small toe without losing your big toe joint? So that might create some opening here in your inner thigh. Be kind. Come on up and try it on the other side. So we've got this really wide stance, more than one of our legs distance between our feet, maybe a leg and enough. And then you're gonna find that little bit of hip shift that we found before. As you fold deeper at this hip, keep pulling this other one away and move in and out of that a few times. So you can practice that idea of how do I fold at the hip while I release at the knee, rather than bending the knee. Constantly be aware of what this back leg is doing. It's this strength of the back leg that's pulling you so that in some sort of strange alternate reality, you could be hanging off of the back leg rather than pouring all the weight onto the front leg. And then once you're used to that idea of folding this hip joint, releasing this knee, check to see where this knee is lined up. Can you get it to open over the small toe while you keep the big toe joint down? So we're looking for a little bit of opening in this inner thigh. Right. So our triangle, Trikonasana stance, is usually narrower than this, but not always. That's to extended legs. We'll be going into a posture that has this bent front knee, and we'll need that stance. And then we get back out of it. Same way as always, take a moment, take a stroll if you need to, but do observe what's going on, especially if you have more circulation in your legs and through into your feet. Rock and roll, we want that. And then we're going back out again. So find your 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock with the back foot, 12 o'clock with the front foot, wide stance, room between your 2 feet. Both thighs roll out, rib cage is going to turn. We're going to go back into that sense of release here. Can you release far enough with the knee pointed more over the small toe than the big toe that you can lean down on your elbow? If the answer is no, lean on your hand. I would like you to practice this idea of using the back leg to pull the back hip up away from this front knee. Now you can play this game lower and lower and lower if you have the flexibility in the back ankle, the back hip, and the strength in the back of your front hip joint. This is not a, yes, your quadriceps will engage. This is not a quadriceps exercise. Keep feeling how this back leg pulls you off your front leg. And then come on up, see what's happening on the other side. So my chair folks, you are simply doing this in the chair. Yes, one sits bone is going to come up off the chair. We're okay with that. So again, we start with a tilt, hold with the hip, release the knee, find a support for the torso, which can stay in that twist. And we're focusing on this action of the back leg. I'm going to move into the chair. For my chair folks, I'm going to be sitting diagonally on this chair. So notice my legs don't go straight out next to me. They're a little bit in front of me. And I may not be turning all the way to 10 o'clock back there, or I may discover that this foot, what would be the back leg, would be coming further. Now, instead of rocking and releasing, once we get into the full stance here, you will be folding that foot in under the knee so that you have a perpendicular shin here. But for the moment, we are practicing, even in the chair, this sense of pulling with the back leg, which is what will lift this sits bone off the chair. And by now, it's time to bring those legs back into center and back underneath you. So I'm going to start with the chair folks for a moment here. So you start square, you find your turn, bring your front foot underneath your ankle, and then you're just going to lean this way. And that's going to be the shape that you're going to be working in. And then you'll build the upper body on top of that. Those of us who are standing, out we go again. So we're finding that nice wide stance, lots of space between one foot and the other, with the caveat that your back outside heel has to stay firmly on the floor without causing pain and misery in the foot or the ankle or anything else further up the food chain. Once you've set your feet in that 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock position, rotate the thighs, rotate the ribs. Now we are taking the arms out. Shift your hips as if you're going into triangle. Fold more at the hip, let the knee release. Pay attention to where it's going. Direct it more over the small toe side than the great toe side. Use this back leg to pull your hip even further back. Bring your elbow to rest on your thigh. So you're going to continue to feel that pull up and backwards, diagonally up and backwards to the high corner of the ceiling. And here, without losing that twist, the arm is coming overhead. So it's right alongside your ears, the same way it was in Urdhva Hastasana. Notice which direction your hand is pointing. It's toward the floor, same as in Urdhva Hastasana, when you were upright and then hands went toward each other. Same thing's going on here. So we want to notice that the back leg is pulling us up and backwards, which frees the torso to be supported to create a straight line. At the moment, we're just working for straight line with this back leg. Eventually, that would change. So if we were standing up, it would be one leg that we're standing on, and the other leg would be lifted up to the side. So this elbow can help guide the knee backwards over the small toe side. It can also push down and help you twist. Either look straight ahead, or if you're able to turn far enough to look up toward the ceiling, go for it. So when we're ready to come up, your back leg is going to pull even more strongly. Your core will be engaged, and you'll find a big inhalation, and this top arm will help guide you up. So do that all at once. Back arm, back leg, top arm, core engaged, inhale. And then you swivel around the other side. So we're working in Parsva Konasana, side angle pose. We're making an angle with the legs, feet, thighs, rib cage, arms. Make the angle. Feel that back leg, the direction that it's pulling you. Release. The fold is in the hips, release the knee. That knee moves away from that back leg, but the back leg doesn't follow, right? Knee is going to move more to the small toe side. Keep the big toe joint down. If you can't get far enough to rest the elbow, rest the hand. Just make sure you're not distorting the shoulder here. So again, we're thinking of an extended line with the arm alongside the ear, all the way through the spine. This is not a side bend. All the way through the spine, down into the back leg. And the same way in Urdhva Hastasana, that we reach the arm one way and push with the leg the other way to create length through the torso. Welcome to that lovely side stretch. We're not losing the twist. Bottom arm can help, pushing the knee slightly backwards, pushing down with the elbow to help with the twist. And when you're ready to come up, remember back leg, top arm, core engaged, inhale, all at once. Back leg, top arm, core engaged, inhale. And then turn your feet forward. Scoot them into where you've got some control. Ah, and you come. So notice, where are you now? What's your energy level like? What are the sensations through the body? How are you breathing? And let's get a little bit of stretch in the calves. You can use a rolled up blanket or towel. I really love these half domes. This gets so much done. You've done this before. You've been following along these videos. This is just get the toes up while the heel is firmly down. Things to notice. A, are you in pain? In which case, back up. Did your heel lift? Back up. What are your hips doing? Notice mine are way over to the side here. That's not an ideal place to be. We would like to have the hips lined up about hip distance with the feet. And then from there, you can decide, okay, do I want to shift the other foot further and further forward? Your back calf will tell you what's possible. If you feel the stretch on the sole of the foot, back up, try again. That's not a productive place to stretch and open. There's a lot of very strong supportive fibrous tissue there. It does not need this kind of a stretch. The back of the calf, though, as you let that heel descend into the floor, using your imagery, using your breath, right? You want to keep your breath going. Maybe the imagery is a mudslide down the back of the calf. Maybe the imagery slides all the way down from the hamstrings. Maybe it slides all the way down from the waist. You can play a little bit with hip twisting to see what's going on. But if you find that you have twisted a lot, you have opened the hips and taken everything out of a moderately efficient alignment. If you have dropped to the inside of the foot, you're definitely going to start feeling it more on the foot. So roll more to the outside. And by now, you've probably had plenty of time to create some opening. Take a moment to appreciate the difference between one leg and the other. And then toes up, heels down. Outside of the foot, hips lined up so that your weight is actually over that leg. You decide where the second supporting leg is. Other elements to pay attention to up the chain. If this feels like the right place to be, you probably want to back this foot up so that you can be all the way up on top of stuff. So again, we're just going to keep letting that heel drop. Notice if you feel like, oh, okay, the stretch has released a little bit and I'm going to move forward, but then your heel releases and you no longer feel really firm down on the floor, you probably want to back up again. Again, you can use your imagery. This is a stretch that I highly recommend doing daily. My particular time to do it is standing at the sink brushing my teeth. That's when I can be doing something else, but also getting my calves to release. Those calf muscles are constantly adjusting to our balancing, right? They're part of our get ourselves lined up system. So even when you're not actively using those muscles, you are actively using those muscles. Your system is. And again, when you're ready to stop, you back off. And you breathe, and you notice. Especially if you notice that, oh my God, how come I can get up on top of my legs better? How come I can take a deeper breath? Yeah, welcome to how it's all connected. So those of you in a chair, for the next 2 exercises, we are focusing on reaching long through the core, similar to the way we did for that shoulder stretch, but you're going to pay attention now to alignment through the torso. If you are able to be out of your chair, but not without support, the second one can have you upright. I would take your legs fairly wide for stability. And then you're going to reach your hips up and you'll reach your shoulders forward. Again, seeing if you can keep a sense of alignment through the torso. So those of us who are more mobile, let's head back down to the floor for what's fondly called puppy pose. We're starting on hands and knees, and we're going to get that sense of hips right over the knees, right? So our weight is actually on the top of our shins, up here by our knees. And then we are going to, without shifting the hips forward or backwards, backward is usually the preferred direction, walk your hands out and let your torso release down, but we're not in a cow spine here. We're in a long, more like the Urdhva Hastasana reach. So now it's your hips reaching back and up, and then your ribs are still in line, and your head is still in line. This is axial extension. Think of an axis or an axle between 2 wheels. Your hips are one wheel here, your hands down there are another wheel, and your spine is making the axle. And your shoulders will tell you how much they're able to open. So be kind. Some of you will find, well, I can't really go very far. Or maybe you're just a little bit past the hands and knees position. Start where you are, right? If you try to start where you need to end up, things get hurt. So once you've found that sense of axial extension, nice long torso, hands glue on the thumb pad, the small finger side, so these are the wrists, and then on the small finger joint and the index finger joint, and we would like to have your index fingers parallel and pointing straight ahead. The eyes of the elbows are going to look at each other. That's the inside of the elbow. And your hands are going to be pushing the mat forward and away from your hips, as if you're trying to make your mat longer. Those of you whose sticky mats are not sticky, you may have to modify to grab to the edge of the mat and push that way. And by now, it's probably a good time to come up and out and take a break. I'm going to use props for the next, we're going into downward dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. You do not need any of these props, but they are very helpful if you have them. So again, share people, you're either repeating what you just did, or if you can stand, you're doing that second modification. Those of you who have a wall that's handy, again, you do not need any of this. You can do this all free standing. If you have blocks, we'll be using those. If not, you turn your hands so that the tip of your thumb and the side of your index finger plant against the wall. And that gives you something to push away from. Now, my preferred way to do this is with blocks, because then we don't turn the hands, we're able to get that alignment. Let the heel of the hand press into the block. Some of you, PS, are going to need that support for your wrists until they get used to being able to work in this direction. Just make sure that this thing that you are using is not going to slide. The other thing I'm going to use, and you want this to be relatively soft, so you could turn a block on its side and then put something soft on top of it. Or if you have a foam block, that'll be soft enough. You'll have to do a little bit of playing, and I know it's frustrating at first, but this particular arrangement of props is so supportive for downward dog. So we're getting into it kind of from that puppy pose, not quite puppy pose. And then we're going to push, tuck your toes under, push with your hands into the wall and down into your blocks if you have them. We're going to speak as if you have props, but use the modification. Your heels may not reach
the floor. Don't panic about that. Make sure it's the outside edges of the heels that are reaching toward the floor. We do want the knees extended, right? So for some of you, that may mean that you're up on your heels. It's not ideal. It puts more weight on your shoulders, but you're doing what you can, and then slowly start to lower. And I would suggest spending a little time going between bent knees that allow you to really push through the length of the torso and that up on the toes position, but still with that pushing the hips backward and upward. Now, if you can settle into your Adho Mukha Svanasana, the forehead, the top of the forehead is resting on this soft surface. You decide how long you want to stay here. You're actually upside down. Your heart is higher than your brain, and you are breathing up into your diaphragm. And when you're ready to come down, just fold your knees and come on out.
And come to whatever version of a sitting position allows you to feel upright through the torso. I'm going to change the camera angle, and we'll be working mostly on the floor unless you're in a chair. Okay, so for my chair people, we are working pretty consistently in this sort of a shape or in this sort of shape, right? Whatever you can do. If you do not have a chair where you can turn sideways, come toward the front of the chair and let your leg drop down around the armrest. And then we'll be working with wide legs, so you can open this out wider and this out. This is not ideal. This is a little more wide than we like, but we're working around what you have, right? Something is better than nothing. Those of us who are down here on the floor are on one knee. And again, we'd like to be straight up and down. If your knee is complaining here, please put something underneath it. Don't leave your knee hanging and in misery. Other leg is about 90-90 here, 90 at the hip, 90 at the knee, 90-90-90 is down there at your ankle. And we are focused on your hips, on your pelvis here. And with your lower abs, you are going to lift up the bottom of the pelvis and rock the top of it a little bit backwards, and then let it go. If you are using your butt muscles, you are not helping. The more we can make this about a deeper work, so we started with the lower abs, but eventually we'd like this to be happening for very deep postural muscles along the front of your spine. So if you are already working that deep, do not go back out to the lower abs to make this happen. You will feel a gentle pull, Don't try to get it all done at once. Your body will not stand for that. On the quadriceps here, the front of your thighs, you may feel a gentle pull across the front of the hip joint. Also good. We're just looking to open up this whole front aspect of the torso into the legs. And then see what's going on the other leg. It's a different adventure there. So again, lower abs if you're just starting this work and are working superficially. If you are in connection with that deeper core, absolutely go into that. This will not be a big movement, right? For those of us with limited mobility here, this is very, very helpful to be able to find how to lengthen this lower back. Do not force. More curve backwards is not necessarily better here. What we want to focus on is what are the sensations on the front of the thigh or front of the hip. For those of you who are working deeper, you may have heard of the psoas complex. That's that connection between your spine and your leg. And we are working on lengthening all of that as well. Then come on back to the first side. I'm going to change the aspect a little bit here. This way, so I'm staying on the first leg. So you are on the first side. I have just changed which direction I'm facing. We're still in the same position. If you want, you can gently engage a slight stretch here, but this now is the leg that we're working with. So you want to get used to pulling that leg back into you, and you will notice that your hips move slightly. So if I change legs here, I could have been doing this whole lunge thing here with my hips very open, which is one way to avoid the stretch. Pulling this leg back in will square me up so that I'm not avoiding the stretch here. It also does a lot to integrate the thigh into the torso here, which we want. We want that stable connection. And then go around to the other side and get that same thing going. So again, you can choose, do you want to engage that gentle stretch? Keep it very gentle so you can focus on what this front thigh is doing. We would like this to be kind of an inner thigh action. So it may look like, oh, the hip is moving, so she's pulling the leg back with the hip. No, this is about finding that deeper, that rooted core, that deeply neurological connection, supportive connection here. So you can visualize your thigh bone going straight back, so maybe back up in the hip joint a little bit if that helps you. But yes, we are letting it square up the hips. The hips do not have to stay really still while the thigh is moving in and out. That's not the point. But drawing the inner thigh in to connect deeper to the pelvic floor and the belly here is very helpful. And then if you need to come off your knees, absolutely come off your knees. Sitting is probably your best bet in anything that works. Again, just check in, notice what you feel. So chair folks, we're going to be going to that more extended back leg. Those of you who are on the floor, if you have a yoga mat, it gives you a distance between your feet side to side. If you do not, just go a little bit wider than shoulder distance. So you can start on that one knee, 1 foot. We've got front foot over on one side of the mat, knee over on the other side of the mat, and then we're going into straightening the back leg. Let me turn so you can see what I'm talking about. We're extending the back leg. So as soon as that back knee bends, you need to do a thing. So for some of you, that will mean coming up higher. You can put a chair in front of you, you can put some blocks there. Everything will be all on one side. You don't have to be over that front leg. We're all on the inside of that front leg. We would love front knee either over the ankle or slightly behind it, which is where I am. We would love this hip to be able to drop without losing that back leg work, right? So this back leg, we've done this before, this back leg is doing all the work to hold you up, push the toe joints into the floor, reach the heel backwards. You can, if you want to, pull this front thigh into you the way you just learned on that kneeling lunge, and then let it go. And set yourself up on the other side. So again, you can start on your knee and foot. We've got width going on here. And then find that place where this front knee is not going to advance past the ankle, but you can still extend that back leg. Push into the toe joints, reach back with the heel, let this hip drop if it's willing to. And both hands can be here on the floor. You don't need to be upright for this. We're looking to get into a very low kind of insect sort of shape. Again, you can practice pulling this inner thigh back into the torso. We're letting the hips open in so many places. And then let it go. Take a break. So break means you're checking in, right? Break also might mean that your mind is having a really hard time staying present. Let it wander all over time and space for a moment. Take a breath and bring yourself back. Because we're going back into that shape. Those of you on the chair, you're going to use your arm strength, perhaps this way. Perhaps you'll be able to get your elbow, right? So you decide you're going to be doing push, push, hand against leg. We're going, those of us on the floor are going into that same deep lunge. Opposite hand can stay on the floor. Same side hand. So the arm is not winning and the leg is not winning. You find your position. Here's one of the reasons why pulling the thigh in is so helpful. And then you ask the inner thigh to engage a little bit more by pushing into it with the arm. The push in the arm will also help to engage your core here so that you're very strong and stable. This is a wonderful way to stretch and open the hips while keeping everything integrated. If you just let this become passive, your hips like to be functional when they're being stretched, and this is a great way to be functional when you're being stretched. So not passive at all. Let it go. Find the other side. So width of the mat or wider than shoulder distance. Check that front knee so it's not going beyond the ankle. It can be behind, but not closer to the toes. Back leg activates, push the toes into the floor, reach the heels back. You can, yes, you can absolutely. These arms are active, supporting the torso weight. Check to see how low are your hips willing to go, your pelvis. Can you get that inner thigh pulling back into the joint? And then get active. So I love one of the teachers that I really enjoy said, not like Godzilla. And I would agree, not like Godzilla. We are not knocking down Tokyo. We are just finding that gentle resistance so that the core engages, the inner thigh engages. And then let it go. And coming onto your knees is a great place to come because we're going to find Balasana. If this is not available to you, don't take your break here. But take a moment just to check in, see where you are while I go back to the chair, folks. So people on a chair, you want a second surface here. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. I'll give you a possibility for that. Well, it could, if it was a higher surface, so what you have is a desk in front of you. Yes, just make sure that you're toward the front edge of your chair so you can lean back. You're going to come into this curled up place. If you have a surface that's the same height or a little bit lower, pull it in as close as your knees will allow you to go and your lower back will allow you to go, because you're going to curl up and let your head just come between your knees, which is going to stretch open the back of the torso. So if feet are on the floor, bring the feet as close back as you can get. I would suggest sitting further back on the chair so that you're well supported, because you want to curl up. We're looking for this very curled up shape. Those of you on the floor, curl up. So if you can, if being on your knees is okay, but you're not able to get your hips down, here's where some extra stuff can be helpful. So maybe you've got, I'm going to use my dome and my rolled up towel to give me a little bit of support between my calves and my thighs. And then I'm going to curl up as much as possible here. Ideally, we have sits bones right down on heels. A lot of us don't have the flexibility in the spine to get that. So work where you can, and then you can decide, do you want support under your head? Make sure there's something soft on top, right? So I'm using a wooden block, which is way too hard. It would go wherever your head needs to rest to curl up. So there's a version of I'm focusing on keeping my sits bones really glued to my heels. Or you can work more on the upper back, letting the bottom come off the heels a little bit. Or you can find that sweet spot in between. At any of these places, you want to make sure that the weight of the head is supported. Now, if you can get the head on the floor and you would rather have your arms alongside your legs, sure, go for it. We are breathing into the back of the torso, so all the way down into the lower back, past the lungs. Again, we're not trying to force anything open here. We're just letting the breath and the shape gently open from the inside and the outside. Thighs are together, so yeah, if your thighs feel like, but they're in the way, I can't breathe. Welcome to one of the points of Balasana. So Balasana is child's pose. If you have been taught child's pose with the knees apart,
Your instructors are not wrong. They're just from a different tradition to mine. And mine is that Halasana is with the knees together. They both do good things. They just do different things. And then come on up. And let's come to sitting. Again, I'm going to focus on our chair, folks, but I'm going to pause for a moment again. Okay, so while I'm focusing on our chair, folks, those of you who are getting ready to sit on the floor, you can decide, do I need to sit up on a thing? Do I need some blocks to support? We'll be sitting with wide open legs. So those of you on a chair, you can put your feet up or not, bolstered level maybe entire chair here. If your feet are on the floor, we're just going for being on the side of the foot. Now, if you can sit back in the chair and have the support for this, for the second part especially, this will be ideal. The first part, you can sit toward the front edge. Those of you who need to sit toward the front edge in order to open the thumbs, make sure you have something else in front of you. Those of us who are on the floor, I will be using a thing to sit up on. If this is a comfortable position for you and you want to sit flat on the floor, absolutely have at it. If your hip wants your knees way up here, do things that support. So I'm using a heavy block on its tall side. You can stack up lots of blocks. I actually don't want my knees up there. So you do want to be able to stack up your spine. If you are in this turtle related position, sit higher, build a bigger stack. We've done this before where you just gently pulse. Remember, this is not about getting the knees to go someplace. We're working higher. We are working within the hip joint here. So the pulse is for the top of the thigh to drop down into gravity and release, drop down into gravity and release. So if you're one of those people who's sitting on the floor and your legs are already down there, you're just going to lift a little bit and lower, lift a little bit and lower. Keep your breath going. We're differentiating thigh and hip. A lot of the time we move them together, our hip joints get frozen, and we want to be able to let the thigh have its own movement while the hips, the pelvis, are stable. And if this is not a comfortable place for you, we're going to go on to something different, but we're coming back to this position. Give your legs a break. If you're happy sitting there, just hang out there and wait for the rest of us to catch up for a moment. So this is another one of these observe, catch your breath, let your brain have a wander if it needs it moment. The discipline of focus in yoga is not natural to a lot of people. So if it feels really challenging for you, yes, of course it's good for you, but recognize the challenge. Give yourself a break when you need to. It's not just a physical art, not even mainly a physical art. Come back to this Baddha Konasana, fixed angle, bound angle, where we have the soles of the feet together and the legs as wide open as they're willing to be. So we've rotated the legs in the socket here and then opened them out. Right? So now we're going to play with the thighs stay relatively still and the hips rock. So again, we're differentiating. Let me turn sideways. So we're not rocking in the ribs here, right? We are taking the top of the hip bone, arcing it forward, and then up over the top and arcing it back. And if you want to use your hands to help, absolutely. Be kind with all stretches. When you find the edge of the stretch, that's the most productive place. Forcing yourself into an end position and suffering there with all sorts of distortions does you no good. That's when you discover, but I've been stretching for years and my body won't change. Yeah, because your nervous system said you don't know how to treat your body and I'm going to protect you. Now, if you discover, so a little rocking where you feel a gentle pull is doing more for you
than forcing yourself to flatten over your feet onto the floor. If you can flatten over your feet onto the floor and do it by rotating your belly, sure, go for it. So for me today, my hip joints don't want to go very far. So I'm taking my belly as far toward my feet as it will go, and I'm not going to force my ribs further. If you get your belly fairly far over and it's not a long distance for your ribs to go, so again, if I go sideways, so if I have my belly this far and I want to take my ribs a little bit further, we're okay with that. It's just this big rounding that's not doing anything for us. When we fold forward over this, it's our Adho Mukha Baddha Konasana. We're looking downward in this round angle pose, and we've got our hips rotated over our thighs. And then it's time to come up. And again, let your legs escape. I'm going to go back to chair people, but those of you who are on the floor, roll over onto your belly, rest your forehead on your hands, or turn your head to the side. Let your heels fall outward, and we're going to do one more thing before relaxation. Those of you in the chair, you want more than one surface. Although actually, I can give you a way to do this with no extra surfaces. But starting with your extra surface here, you're going to fold forward. And if you can get your forehead all the way down, so if it's a desk or a chair, if you've got something on the floor, please don't go that far. That's it. A second surface that's at chair level or higher is what's productive here. And then you're going to see if you can get your hands back on your thighs. So for some of you, this is not going to be doable, right? Do what you can. If you can only get your hands to here, we can live with that. The next game you're going to play is use the muscles between your shoulder blades to lift your hands up. And then you are going to arch. So for me, I think of it as looking up over the top of my chair forward here. And then let the head come back down. And the whole time, the hands are staying up. Don't do that forever while we're setting up on the floor, right? When you're tired, take rests. Those of us who are on the floor, we're going to be working Salabhasana, your locust pose. This gets the whole back line of the body working all at once. So from that rest position, bring your legs back into neutral. Reach them back a little bit. You're trying to lengthen your toes further away from your hips. When your legs are as long as possible, gently press the inner thigh together. Then bring your hands into a grasshopper position. So as if you had a really bad push-up position. Your hands are back by your chest. If you can rest your forehead on the floor, do that. For some of you, I know your neck will not allow that. Just do what you can. If you need to turn sideways, do that. And then same with the folks who are in the chair, use the muscles between your shoulder blades to lift your elbows up, lift your hands off the floor. Floor under your hands is now lava. Those hands are not going back down until we're done. On an inhalation, reach your legs backward, reach your chest forward, and lift them up. As you exhale, everything comes down but your hands. So on the inhalation, we're working the whole back line of the body, from the feet to the top of the head. And then we are releasing everything except for that little bit of diagonal muscle, that diamond between your shoulder blades as we come back down. So feel the back of the thighs engage. Feel the back of the torso engage. As the back line engages, the front line has to soften and release. Make sure you soften that back line, again, except for that diamond, as you release. If you can do a couple more, go for it. If you're done, you're done. This is counter to everything in your daily life. And when you are completely done, just rest. Go back to that resting position. Now, if you like this resting position on your belly, and as long as you can completely relax here, you can use this for your Shavasana, or you can roll over onto your back. Again, in your chair, you're finding a supported position.
I suggest you find that place where you can relax. Remember, on your back, you can put your legs up on a chair. Just make sure that your thighs are relatively perpendicular. This is not a relaxing position for your knee joints. Stay there as long as you like. Find your initial relaxation. Discover places that feel tense or limited and fidget into a more relaxed position again. If you are trying to relax directly on a sticky mat, good luck with that. Spread out a towel or peel the sticky mat away, be on your floor, something that's less friction than this sticky mat. You want your body to spread out as you relax. If you don't have time to relax right now, you've done a whole thing, rock and roll. Take a few moments again, center your breath, notice your sensations. We'll have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.